today we are happy to celebrate the International Literacy Day. And this celebration tells a lot to all of us who are in this meeting. We have been engaged in this process for decades because we recognize the importance of literacy, not only for learning at school, but also for learning in life in general. And today we have we are expecting to have a very interactive section with very informed panelists, and we also hope to have very hot discussions. Usually when we are celebrating a day, we celebrate achievements, but I think we will have also space to discuss our challenge and to see how we are going to handle those challenges. I would like to introduce, first of all, the moderator of the first section of today, Dr. Rajarj Sain. We call him always Raj. Raj is our Director of Programs at PAL Network. His focus is on leveraging data to improve outcomes, designs, and the processes of development of programs. He has managed monitoring and evaluation and the research projects related to education, agriculture, sanitation, governance, and women empowerment across Kenya, Sierra Leone, Nepal, and India, for a variety of clients from World Bank, international NGOs, governments, and USAID. Raj also holds a PhD in computational mechanics from Carnegie Mellon University in USA. So Raj, please, I will hand over to you to take us through the first section. Thank you.
Raj, you're muted, kindly.
Thank you very much, Armando. Glad to be on this webinar with our esteemed panelists as well as all our participants. Greetings from PAL Network. In case you don't know about PAL Network, I'll give you a 20-second introduction. The People's Action for Learning Network is a South-to-South partnership of 15 organizations conducting citizen-led assessments or citizen-led action in 14 countries across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. PAL Network supports its members by facilitating learning and better practice exchanges across the network. And this is an example of...
Et ça, c'est juste un exemple d'échange dans lequel nous sommes en
context.
Só dentro do contexto, existem alguma discussão sobre a literacia deste esforço digital para o desenvolvimento humano. É um dia muito apertado, um dia fantástico. Estamos aqui também para termos estes panelistas aqui. Muito obrigado pelo PAL e vamos então avançar com o nosso debate. Temos também alguns...
Suddenly couldn't go to school because of the COVID-related school closures. Now, governments responded by supporting distance education. It worked to various degrees of success. Of course, there were issues where households did not have the required technology to get online, to get the children learning, but there were attempts to actually help and support children learn. So that was fantastic and that was commendable. But what we see is that even before the COVID-related lockdowns, there was a massive learning crisis in which UNESCO says about 617 million children and youth did not have sufficient foundational skills, basic sufficient foundational reading and math skills, right? And it is expected that this school closure is further going to worsen the learning outcomes of these children, right? And it is estimated that approximately 54% of a year's contact time was lost on average per child, which means more or less in hard to hit areas in the developing world, children lost about a year. Okay, so now what we want to discuss in today's dialogue is, and what we want to learn from our panelists is, we want to share and learn from their experiences on using digitally driven technology to support foundational literacy and numeracy amidst the ongoing pandemic, right? Second, that we want to learn is, we want to reflect on what more can we do, what more needs to be done to improve the use of technology to enhance foundational literacy numeracy. I would request the audience and the team to please join me in welcoming today's panelists. So thank you very much for joining us today, panelists. And let me begin with introducing our 4 panelists today. First off is Zaida Mgala, who is the Executive Director of Uwezo Uganda. Zaida has 10 years experience working as a secondary school teacher and 15 years experience working with local and international NGOs. She's previously served as Senior Program Officer for Uwezo Tanzania. She's a social scientist, regional coordinator for youth sexual and reproductive health for TANESA. Mama Zaida is a writer. She's authored several case studies, publications, international peer-reviewed journals, and working papers. She holds a master's degree in education from Murdoch University. Welcome, Mama Zaida.
Thank you very much, and hi, everyone.
Paul, could we move to the next panelist slide, please? We have Edith Mendez Olarte, who is joining us from MIA, Mexico. She's a pedagogy manager. Edith has worked as a general director to mobilize, innovate, and learn AC. She's a member of the civil organization called Center for Agrarian Studies, collaborator of the Coping Society of Mexico AC, as head of training area. She was part of the CONAFE pilot project called Community Post-Primary and head of the Department of Citizen Attention and Social Controller in the Human Development Program Opportunities. Edith Mendez has a degree in pedagogy. Paul, could I request you to please take us to, yes, thank you. Moetsepi Matseng is the country coordinator and co-founder of Young Love. Young Love is our member in Botswana. Moetsepi is committed to empowering youth to reach their full potential. She is the ministerially appointed chair of the government of Botswana's National Youth Council. She's been named the 40 Changemakers under 40 in Botswana. She's also sits on former President Mogae's Youth Council. She's a Queen's Youth Leader and UNESCO Youth Forum keynote speaker as well. Welcome. Welcome to the discussion. Lastly, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, who will join us in the second session, is the Executive Director of USAVA Agenda. He is known for his work in Uwezo, Kenya. He is responsible for the strategic leadership of USAVA, including programming, partnership development and engagement, fundraising, and outward communication. His research interests are in the areas of equity in education and in the broader society, rural development, gender, as well as public and social accountability. Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa holds a PhD in development economics. Welcome to Dr. Manyasa. All right, so thank you very much, panelists, for being part of today's discussion. And if I may, let's focus on the first question in the session 1. So the first session question was your experiences on using digitally driven technology to support foundational literacy and numeracy amidst the ongoing pandemic. So may I request first presenter to share with us their experience in 5 minutes, please, so that we have time to discuss and deliberate on how to actually take it forward and learn from it. So Motsepi, thank you, and please do share your learnings and insights with us.
Thank you so much, Raj. I'm just really excited to be a part of this discussion today. And happy International Literacy Day to each and every one of you that's ensuring that children can read and access the world. So my presentation is just to share a little bit more as to what Young Love did, particularly in the times of COVID-19 and when the pandemic started. I'll try keep it to 5 minutes. So please bear with me as I brief through the presentation. Just to also mention, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Young Love was delivering in 20% of primary schools in the country, literacy and numeracy sessions that were anchored around teaching at the right level program. And hopefully most of you all know about TAL, but it is an adaptive learning program that ensures that we are grouping students according to their different learning abilities and then target teaching based on where the student is at beyond, curriculum expectations and grade. So this is the work that we were doing prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, when schools shut down, we had to really quickly devise a plan to still stay connected to students and the parents that we work with, because we believe that learning must continue, and using technology is one of the ways in which we could ensure that this happens. And therefore, when schools closed, we quickly collected phone numbers from parents and the students that we worked with in order to be able to deliver messaging that will be able to ensure their educational needs are met. And hence why we have devised, a term. It doesn't necessarily originate from Young Love, but we saw it fit to be able to use low technology, which is just a simple feature phone that is easily accessible to students. Why is this the case? The graph on my right shows that in terms of internet access, and even more contextualizing it to Botswana, that less than half of parents have access to internet connectivity, but the cell phone penetration rate in Botswana is 120%. So that means that each and every household has access to just a simple feature phone. It doesn't have to be a smartphone, and therefore that's why we used low technology to be able to access the parents and the students that we work with. We therefore send weekly phone calls as well as text messages, and as well as low technology is accessible as well as more affordable compared to the high-tech solutions that may require internet connectivity and high usage gadgets such as internet and tablets, which young people, particularly in Botswana, don't have access to. And we believe that the work that we did is relevant during this crisis and other school closures. We're seeing that in Botswana, schools have opened, have closed, have continued.
Hemos abierto y hemos cerrado las escuelas algunas veces. Por eso nosotros creemos que nuestra estrategia se puede aplicar más allá de la pandemia y es una forma para alcanzar a los niños. Quisiera compartir con ustedes cómo nosotros identificamos, cómo comunicamos con los alumnos durante los cierres de las escuelas y lo que se llama aprendizaje remoto. Y tuvimos algunas intervenciones. Nosotros comenzamos con mensajes de textos, igual como seguimientos, llamadas telefónicas. Y
SMS
la
only
segunda intervención, nosotros enseñamos los materiales de educación a través de la radio. nosotros tuvimos que comprender diferentes formas de para trabajar con los niños. Tuvimos que reducir la falta de alfabetización y tuvimos que contactar con los padres durante
parents just attend parent-teacher conferences, as well as going at the end of every term to collect the report. But this time around, we really got to engage with parents for them to be involved in a child's learning. And I think as we continue this conversation, it's very key on thinking together about what more could be done. But we're seeing that the role of a parent is very crucial, especially during these times. This is just an example of some of the problems that we shared with the parents. We would ask the parents to show the phone to the student, or sometimes when we do phone calls, we would ask the parents to put the phone on loudspeaker so that the child and the parent can all learn together. So these were very much simple material that we shared over the phone, but also targeted towards the level or the ability of the child. For example, if the child could only understand a problem in numeracy at addition level, we'll send them additional materials. This would, of course, be similar as we embark in the literacy journey, in the sense of if a child is at word or at paragraph or at story level, we would send, and tailor the messaging across via weekly SMSs and phone calls. All is to share that there's a lot that we're learning during this period, and we believe that these are the conversations that should open the doors on ways in which us education stakeholders need to ensure that every child can read, every child can do maths, for them to be able to be to access and be able to really learn and ensure that no child is left behind. Thank you so much, Raj. I hope I spoke in 5 minutes, and that will be all on my end.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely presentation and taking us through the innovation that Botswana you're doing as part of Young Love. I'm sure we'll have very interesting questions for you to field later on. Just a request to all other participants and presenters, let us know if the pace of the presentations needs to be slowed down a little bit so that we can get interpretation working, and those who are following from other languages through interpretation can actually follow. Thank you very much.
Please, yes, let's speak a bit slower, please. Kindly, just speak a little slower.
Thank you. Thank you for that confirmation. Was it Alan? Okay.
That's correct, please.
So moving on to the experiences from Botswana, can we go to the experiences in Tanzania? And Mama Zaida, could you please share with us your experiences in actually how the technology was used to support FLN during the pandemic and during school closures?
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Zaida from Tanzania. Slide number 2, please. Thank you very much. So Tanzania was not exceptional from other countries. We were all hit by COVID-19 as per introduction from Raj, and many organizations were really struggling to see what we can do to support children. In Tanzania, over 10 million children missed school during the school closure due to COVID-19, although for us it took a very short time between March up to June 2020. But children during school closure, they were obliged to access learning content at home. And the government did a lot to to provide the learning content through television, radio, and other forms. But we started by asking ourselves a question. Were all children able to learn at home? And we conducted a quick survey, including teachers and some parents who are involved in our Jifunze Teaching at the Right Level approach in 6 districts. Next slide. And I would just like to share with you a few results from that quick survey. For example, sorry, I don't see the other number. Okay, so about 69% of the teachers, they reported that children were not able to continue learning while at home during the school closure. Next slide, please. And when we asked parents, about 91%, they also confirmed that children were not able to continue learning, and they were not learning at home the way they would have learned while in school. Next slide, please. And about 97% of the parents said the children were not able to access learning content from the online platform. And looking at other sources of data with regard to access to internet and smartphone penetration, we got these statistics from the Statista data, which revealed that in Tanzania, the internet penetration rate is 49%. So you can imagine how many households and citizens are able to access the internet, where they could support children also to access the learning content. But also the smartphones. Teachers were sending learning content on smartphones, but not everybody has a smartphone. So from the Statista data, is in Tanzania is 75% smartphone penetration. Next slide, please. So what we did, because we were working in remote areas, and most of them, there was a challenge of accessing internet, but also parents could not afford to purchase the voucher to connect online. We distributed recorded literacy and numeracy learning content on flash to the households so that they could watch through TV, and in some rural areas, many households, they have TV sets, so children were able to watch the learning content on literacy and numeracy. And also we provided teachers with tablets to support them to assess children quickly after school reopening, to assess the learning loss and support them through Jifunze Teaching at the Right Level approach. And we were able to reach about 7,000 children in 6 districts. In the assessment, about 41% of the assessed children in grade 3 to 6, they could not do correctly numerous operations. And we compared that before COVID, when we assessed children of the same grade level, about 58% were able to pass that test. So there was a decrease in performance of children, which we could associate with staying home for a longer period. And also we developed a parent poster with guideline on how to keep children safe at home and support them to continue learning. And this was shared online with parents and through Shule Direct online platforms that has a national coverage to reach many parents. Next slide. Oh, sorry. This is to session 2. Okay, so this is what we did. And we realized that there's inequality in accessing the technology, especially in the remote areas, because in the rural areas, the experience showed that many parents have smartphones and they can access various learning content from various online platforms or through the TV and radio. But in the remote places, there's a challenge. And these are the things I think we are going to discuss on session number 2 on what can be done and what we can recommend to the government and other actors to ensure that children are supported and they can access easily affordable technology like the one which has been shown by Botswana, and make sure that all children have equal access to learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mama Zaida, for sharing how you used the Flash content distributed offline teaching learning material, and it was used by children as well as their households. It's very interesting to see actually assessment for action philosophy being put into practice as part of, assessing and then using Jifunze to help children recover the learning loss. That's fantastic. And I'm sure we'll have questions related to not just that, but other aspects also. Thank you very much. Can we move on to the third presentation of session 1? If I may invite Edith. Edith, could you please take us through your experience in MIA? Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias por la
Thank you very much for the invitation. Hello, everyone from Mexico. I'd like to share 2 experiences in this context of the pandemic, talking about the summer learning as well as MIA learning processes. So in Mexico, the schools were closed for 17 months from the time that we had the lockdown from March 2020. And it's just now that we are opening the schools on 20th of August, when the school cycle started. We just started the school year. So the response that the government had in order to ensure continuity of school for the girls was through social programs, which is called Learn at Home, Aprende en Casa, which basically was focused on learning through television and through different programs. So the private schools, they, for those who want extra resources, technology and connectivity, classes online through different platforms and through different applications. So that is how we saw the differences and inequalities. We saw firsthand how these digital, or rather learning divide exists. Even there are no sufficient teachers, for example, some communities do not even have televisions. And so that motivated us to have our educational projects to design the first educational intervention in order to implement within the school year. And so it was launched in summer of 2020. That's when we launched what we had. And so we had to look at alternatives we could use. And so in order for us to be able to narrow this learning divide, because so much was being lost, even we had the program. So especially we needed to motivate the children to continue learning, because we were having these recordings in schools. And so the summer intervention, it was put together so that we'd be able to deal with different contexts, and especially those children who did not have access to online classes during the last part of the school cycle. And so we did prepare audio lessons, and the parents confirmed that the children are getting bored just looking at the screens all the time, and looking at or maybe looking at computer screens. And so we therefore had to prepare audio lessons, 30-minute audio lessons, which we prepared. And so we did have reading and mathematical exercises. And so we also had what you call exercises for social emotional development, because we knew that there was emotional impact as a result of the pandemic, because of the isolation and lockdowns, and the fact that they were not with their colleagues. And so we did have different activities that we sent to them, and they were sent to different media. We even used Facebook, and for those who had a connection, we also used WhatsApp. And so, and where there was no television or internet, but there was a radio at home, they had maybe CD players. We
Please
also
check
had some
your
lessons
WhatsApp.
put on
So
TV.
Emmanuel is
We
being
would extend them.
represented by Boaz.
Oh.
And Armando forgot the
And
videos, was requesting we play them after this session.
somebody else needs to turn off the microphone, please.
And then there's a participant who said something. Just read. I think we can invite him.
Oh, excuse me, there's some other audio coming in. And besides that, we had, besides just sending this content to the teachers or to the parents, we also had community representatives who accompanied different communities, and we had a mass transmission, and we had a huge follow-up. In spite of the fact that we were transmitting by radio, we also sent people to the community.
Innovación que pusimos en marcha fue reactivando mi aprendizaje, con el objetivo precisamente de motivar y reactivar los aprendizajes en lectura y matemáticas de los niños que iniciaban el siguiente ciclo escolar, porque se inició, se puso en práctica a partir del inicio del primer trimestre del ciclo escolar.
Of the school year.
Alors, nous voulions donc
there was assigned tutor who used to guide them through different media. And those who had internet connection or computer, they had direction of being guided online using Zoom. So each facilitator, each tutor was assigned 10 children that they were working with, and others were reached by WhatsApp. We formed WhatsApp groups, and that's how we were directing the sessions. And where we also used what you call the community libraries, and we had sessions. In these community sessions, there are computers, there's access to the internet. So those who are able to make it to the libraries where there's internet and computers, we had face-to-face meetings with them to complement with our WhatsApp and Zoom. And those are the interventions that we carried out during the pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edith, for that wonderful presentation of what you'd done in Mexico to support children's education. Even though they were out of school, they were being supported and they were being engaged. Thank you very much. So, there's also understanding literacy and the need for digital support. Our other PAL leaders have some messages for participants. So if Armando could share his thoughts on that a little bit and share those messages from our PAL leaders, and then we can move to the Q&A session where we'll be happy to field questions or engage in discussing some aspects that are key to each of these tech-supported innovations to support children's foundational literacy numeracy. Over to you, Armando.
Give more space for the leaders, and I will invite my colleague Paul to start to show the message coming from Willima, director of ASER Center in India. And then we are going to hear also some words from John Mugu, the executive director of ZIS Afrique. So Paul, if you have all in place, please let us hear other leaders.
Schools shut down in most of the world in March 2020. In some countries like India, they are yet to reopen and children have not been in school for over a year. During this time, most countries resorted to sharing technology-based educational inputs, but studies have shown that the impact of the pandemic has been much greater on already vulnerable and disadvantaged children, with access to technology-based devices acting as yet another channel to widen equity gaps. On this International Literacy Day, it becomes even more important that we address these equity gaps and ensure that all children are in school and learning well.
Zizi Afrique wishes all Kenyan children and all the children over the world a happy World Literacy Day. We know that in Kenya, 5 million children who are attending school today are unable to read fluently. But we are there for you. We send greetings to the children of Turkana, Bungoma, and Tana River, who we have been working with, and to the over 20,000 that we have been able to reach one-on-one through technology, through SMS, radio, and other devices. We know that there is promise in using technology to promote the reading of children. To the teachers and parents, you are doing a great job. Continue. And today is when you get every child near you to read something, because through reading we build literacy. Through literacy we develop the world and open a new future for our children. Jisomee, jitegemee.
Thank you all for your attention for these two messages. I think I will hand over to you, Raj, to continue facilitating the questions and the answer section. Raj, please.
Thank you, Armando. And thank you very much, Paul, for sharing those videos. Yes, the situation in India is quite dire. It is not just a health emergency we've been through, we're also going through an economic as well as educational emergency at the moment, because schools are still, those who get access to digital content media are able to progress, learn. Still, it is difficult for a young child to sit on the other side of a screen and engage when around them, their friends, peers, others are not there. So I think that is a tough challenge, and Edith talked about that in terms of the social emotional impact on children, how to support them. So this session is a 15-minute session on Q&A. I think we can get the motor started a little bit with a few questions that we have, and then maybe panelists will get questions from the participants as and when the engine heats up. Is that okay, everybody? So some questions for all of you. So if we look at the SMS program in Botswana, in addition to using SMS, there is a substantial amount of human intervention as well, like people getting on the phone, interacting with people, right? So in that respect, how would you say or how would you characterize the importance of getting parents involved in a program, and also how important is it to figure out when is the right time to send the SMS so that children can see it? What is, how do we keep the content fresh so that children are engaged and they come back and again and learn from it? I think these are very interesting points your presentation brought up. Motsepe, if you could share your thoughts on these few questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Raj, for those interesting questions. And hopefully, as we continue to engage, my panelists and colleagues will still, dive into some of these elements. But let me just start by saying that initially, when we started, we were calling parents to sensitize them on the program, but also to ensure that they know what it's about. They don't just receive an SMS and wonder what is happening. And we found that, that first initial call was to ensure that parents are buying into the program, but also the interest that they have to continuously engage. And we work closely with parents after that phone call to figure out the right time for them to engage. And I think that's an important point to carve out. We had found, for example, that during the week or during the day, parents are working or maybe in further communities, they're engaged, and therefore they won't necessarily be home in time to be able to engage with the children on learning materials. So we conducted phone calls just to find out parent availability, to say when are parents actually available to receive these SMSs and phone calls. We have found it much more effective to send the content over the weekends, particularly when parents are more at home, if they're not engaged in work, but also in the later evening. That's when we are reaching out to parents to ensure that they can be able to see the SMSs on time, but also then share them with their children. One other element to note on this front is that as we have continued to engage, parents have now become more aware of what the student or what their children actually know. And this has been an interesting point, because you would think that, because parents are usually involved with their student or with their child, they would actually know. But we have found that a majority of parents that we worked with didn't actually know the level that the student is at. Can my child read a paragraph? Can they do addition? Can they do subtraction? And this has been a learning journey for both the organization and the parents, but also to note that children have really enjoyed, and this is something that we should capture and learn more on, particularly with the results and what the data shows. But just on a qualitative approach, we have found that children are enjoying, spending time with their parents, but also, learning together. When children know that their parents care or they are paying attention to their schooling, they tend to do better. And this is something that we, as we continue this journey, would wish to understand more on what exactly is that. But we have found that this experience, particularly also using technology, allows parents and students and their children to be mostly involved and intimately involved in learning. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And that's a critical point. And yes, Edith, please go ahead.
Sí, bueno, yo quiero compartir que
I'd like
acá
to share something that the work with the parents has been quite complicated, not impossible. If we think about involving the fathers and mothers, and especially some who find themselves outside on our side, we are also thinking about who else, the other members of the family who can be involved. Because sometimes the parents are not there, but it's somebody else. We find a bigger brother or a grandfather, or there could be another family member who is available in the house. And so for us, we've had to look for these other people. So we've been able to extend these possibilities, not just thinking about the work of the father and mother, but we've also thought about maybe caretakers, tutors, guardians. And so the work that we've done, we've worked through, we've made general presentation, and we've laid out our expectations, what we expect of each of them. And so everybody knows what we expect. So once we have with the materials that we've designed and shared, we've made sure that they're very easily understood by everybody, whether it's the parents or anybody else. So these are the materials for work, which where anyone can use to work with the children. And so they can also be able to gauge whether children are learning when they're using this material. And so at the end of each and every intervention, we do have what you call a customer satisfaction survey. And so we ask, well, what do you think about that? What did you find? How did you find this activity? How was the material? What you are working with? And so that way, the parents and the rest, we are able to also find out how the caretakers or caregivers and the parents, how they are involved through the survey. And so we're able to find out whether their material is easily accessible, if they're able to understand the activities where they're carrying out with the children. So I'd like to say that it is it's quite hard work. And so beyond the school, we find out there's a lot to do. And so we have to gauge the understanding. And so we are also saying that learning can be achieved beyond the school. And so we are also focusing on the fact that you can really learn a lot from home. There's a lot of learning that can go at home, and there's a lot that can be shared at home beyond the school environment. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you for that, Edith. And this aspect of home learning is super important. Mama Zaida, I'll move to you with a question from one of our participants. They are asking, I'll read out the question. Thanks to all the panelists and congratulations. The project presented across Tanzania, Botswana, Mexico raise issues of accessibility of the technology, as we've seen, right? Question is, how representative in the context of community nationwide were the projects? And since PAL deals with literacy, how does the access of literacy by parents or tutors impact on implementation of the projects? I think very important question. Background of parents, how does it impact their participation of the wards, right? Mama Zaida, if you could please help us understand this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, dear participant and panelists and our organizers. In terms of national representation, I reported earlier that we are working in 60 districts, very few districts compared to how huge Tanzania is, because we have around 159 districts. So we only conducted a very small survey to inform us in the area where we are working. And that's the information I have shared from 60 districts, from the teachers who are engaged in the Jifunze intervention, which is inspired by teaching at the right level approach. Now, in terms of involving community and parents, Uwezo, we have a very good experience in engaging with the parents at the household, especially through our learning citizen-led assessment, which is conducted at the household. And based on that, we have created a network of district partners or the local NGOs. And those are the one we oriented on how they can guide the parents in various districts, because we are a very small secretariat. So we use our district partners to reach the household and share the parent poster, which had very important information on safety against COVID-19, but also guiding the parents how to develop like learning plan or program at home, when the parent can sit with children and support them by using the materials we have provided, like the flash, the recorded content on the flash. So we work like that through our district partners and also through the volunteers. But also parents are informed during meetings. They were informed in advance to get their buy-in, but also the sharing of the assessment findings so that they understand the magnitude of the problem. And when we introduce the intervention to support the children, they understand why that is being done. So there are various ways of involving parents to share with them the learning outcomes, but also to involve them on how they can support the children at home. And it has given a lot of positive response from the parents. They were very happy, especially to get the flash, the recorded content, because some of them, they have very cheap TVs where they can show the content to the children. And sometimes it also encouraged collaboration, because in some families where they don't have a TV, children could come and join their colleagues in the house where there is a TV. So that way you can bridge the gap for those who cannot access online. They can still convene and share with the other kids in a household who have that particular facility. Yeah.
Thank you, Mama Zaida. We have another question, and this is from Boaz, who is asking, what are the dynamics you came across on how you onboarded parents and created a buy-in to these various learning programs? How did you bring parents on board? I think that's a very important question. And if we could start, and let's look at each country, yeah? How it happened in Botswana, how it happened in Tanzania, how it happened in Mexico. If you could take a minute just to,
Yeah, in Tanzania, from our experience, we also collaborate with teachers who convene the parent meeting and in collaboration with the village leaders. And that's where issues of education and children learning are discussed, and the relevance of the parents to support their children, considering that the schools were closed. But even after reopening of the school, parents were still needed to support children who were lagging behind so that they can catch up at school, but also when they go home, they use the provided materials to learn. Yeah. And also sharing the evidence. That is very encouraging, because if you just talk and talk and talk, but if you share evidence, they understand that there is a need to support children because children are lagging behind. Yeah.
Thank you. Edith, you want to go next, please? And then we'll go to Machepi. So you're on mute. Edith, you're on mute.
Arranque el micrófono, por favor. Edith, adelante.
Oops. Paul, can you unmute her, please?
Sí, sorry. Nosotros hicimos el trabajo de
We did the sensitization work and dealing with the workers, as well as municipal authorities. On one hand, we talked about the importance of learning for the children, the changes of in the conditions, how to work, how to do distance work. And we also communicated about the possibility of improving the social emotional state of the children. And so for us, that was the entry point, talking about the social emotional aspect. And that's starting that way. We even used some videos, and then we showed how they could support the children in an social emotional way, and how to improve learning at home, etc. And so when we started doing this work of sensitization, it then became a lot more easier. I would say it was easy, but it was quite complicated. Of course, we could not. It was hard for us to visit the home because not everybody took it the same way, and not every child learned in the same way. So distance learning obviously cost a lot, and beyond the other resources, they also had to put in their own time and the continuous work that was needed. And so for us, the follow-up aspect was equally important. And so that is why we had to count on tutors, sending them to homes, and their tutor would connect online, or some of them would go to play centers to be able to proceed with the follow-up. So it was important for us to work in this way. So it was important for us to be able to do a follow-up of the learning process. So it was hard work for us, but we were able to succeed to some level. And, I also talked about other people in the family who was involved, and that is how we were able to create a buy-in on
Thank
our
you.
side.
Thank you very much, Edith. So may I quickly take 1 minute of Motsepe's time for the third question from one of our participants, which is Mohammed from Mozambique, who is asking, how was the assessment of children's learning progress done using the low technology in Botswana? How did you actually do the assessment? Like, we gave out the SMS, how did learning outcomes, how were they measured?
Thank you so much, Raj. Let me start by saying that we conducted phone-based assessments, so via phone calls. We used the ASA tool that is widely used in many other countries to be able to level or what we call learning the abilities where the student is at. So this tool is divided, for example, in 4 categories. Level 1, for example, being addition, and the 4th level, being the highest level on division. So we conducted, this via our phone, but also just now learning more methods to be able to do it in a way such that students are protected, but also feel comfortable in being assessed over the phone. And one of the elements or one of the lessons that we learned from this experience, we had asked the parent to excuse themselves, not necessarily to be fully present, because sometimes you would hear the parents whisper the answer over the phone. So we asked parents to be excused for a few minutes whilst we conducted the assessment, but also again how we were engaging with the child was that we're just now playing a game. This is not a test. It is not an assessment in which you have to panic or just ensure that you are very much confused at what was happening. It was just a simple game that we are playing over the phone and just conducting those assessments over the phone. So we used a ASA tool to ensure that we're conducting our phone-based assessments, and we have really learned a lot on just how to do so over a mobile phone.
Thank you for that. Let's, if it is all right with all the panelists, can we move on to the second session? Fantastic questions all around, and thank you for giving such wonderful responses. Making us think about the nitty-gritties of actually using technology to support children's learning. The second session is, as we had discussed right in the beginning, it is about what more can we do, right? What more can we do to improve foundational literacy numeracy of children using technology? So as part of this, may I invite first Edith, and then Dr. Manyasa is being represented by Ochi. So Ochi, if you could go second, and then Mama Zaida, and then Motsepe. Is that all right?
¿Pueden poner, por favor, la última diapositiva? Está ahí anotado las
last slide, the proposals, some of the proposals that we are bringing up, if you could project them. The proposals that we have here that I'd like to share on different levels. First of all, we should not stop with the creativity and the imagination as we keep looking for alternatives. when we're talking about simple alternatives that can be used to be able to narrow this learning divide, this digital learning divide. Now, we're also thinking that on a macro level, we need to consider as an explicit part the right to education. As part of that, we need to think about digital inclusion as a right in education, as a major factor for us to be able to achieve a quality education. Because when you talk about the rights to education, for all children need to have access, and we have to establish the quality of education that we want to achieve when we're talking about the right to education. Besides that, on talking about the government, in some countries, there are stimulus, there are governmental support, there is economic incentives, there are scholarships. We could also think about inclusion of internet when we're thinking about the support, educational support that the government offer. Maybe we can think about the possibility of getting laptops or internet connectivity on a local or national level. It is also important not just to think about connectivity and maybe laptops, computers, but we also need to think about the curriculum. We need to talk about the development of digital competencies as one of the subjects in schools for students, obviously, in different levels of complexity, depending on the age of the student. And we also need to have teacher training programs, trainings, and we also need to have learning platforms for teaching methods because many know how to use technology for communication, to look for things that we look for. But we do not have platforms for teaching using the same technology. So these platforms need to be used to improve teaching methods in to maximize teaching processes. Um, so, for example, when we think about video conferencing, we had 2 or 3 hours of video conference lessons, and and that can cause a lack of interest because you realize that they are not trained, teachers are not really well trained on the use of facilities such as video conferences. And so the challenge is to move physical learning to digital learning on different platforms. So that is a totally different thing. And the other thing is how to equip schools. We talk about digital inclusion of schools. We have to think about providing technology. Something else, about the teachers and guardians and parents. How can we have learning programs for them for adults, so that we can also have what you call digital learning for adults, where they just go beyond the basic use of devices. And you find, for example, a child is being taken care of by the grandparent, and you find the grandparents, grandfather, grandmother has an old phone, and the child is exposed to smartphones, much developed systems. And so we have to think about how to involve families in thinking about education. In so we find that there's no learning if there are no tools. If there's no appropriate learning tools, learning can be hampered. And so we need to find a way to improve education. That is changing our mentalities. Changing mentality will be the last point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edith, for sharing your views on what more we can do to actually bring on board and support FLN through technology. If I may request Ochi, if since you're representing Dr. Manyasa, if you could share your thoughts on, you've done a survey as part of USAVA agenda. You've seen the digital divide. You've got the hard data. You've talked to parents. You've talked to children, engaged with them. So what, from that data, from that evidence, what do you feel we can do more in addition to support children's learning through technology, supporting through, low tech, high tech, both? Over to you, Ochi.
Thank you, Raj, for the opportunity. I apologize that Emmanuel didn't join us because he was in another meeting. But quickly to what we are discussing now on how to improve use of technology to enhance foundational literacy and numeracy amidst the pandemic. I sent my presentation, but I can just read because, allow me to share my screen.
Paul, could you put up Boaz's presentation, or please allow him to share the screen so that he can present himself?
Yeah, he should be able to share. There is no restriction.
Is it working for you, Boaz?
Yeah, I'm sharing.
Okay, cool.
Now, I hope you're all seeing what I've shared. The first part we need to think of is to build capacity of teachers and parents on how to use and interact with technology. It's very key for us to enhance how the learners, parents at home, are interacting with this platform of reading through tech. Secondly, we need to think how to develop the content which is being shared digitally to be accessible to all, and that must include learners with special needs. We are leaving them behind mostly because for them, maybe they don't see what is being projected on TV. Some of them may not hear what is on radio or read a text. So how can they be included in the learning and numeracy and literacy in school? But also equip digital the libraries where learners can visit online libraries and also get resources and materials to interact with, and that will enhance their reading. But we can also think about community learning sessions, like what TRLs is doing in Turkana, Bungoma, and Tana River, where a community comes together to share information to make their learners read aloud in the community sessions, apart from the radio and TV stations. But also, I don't know who said this, but we need to have workbooks which can be accessed either on print, be shared and distributed amongst the community members, so that they can be as a resource to supplement the materials which are being shared online. There's another thing that we need to think of in hard rural areas, which is very difficult for them to access these platforms because of power connectivity. Do we think of solar radios? I know this is doing something great on ensuring that the radios are solar powered. Maybe TVs are solar powered, or giving lamps to learners so that they can reach at home, because there's no power in their places. Now, there's a question asked about how we onboarded the parents at home to have a buy-in on these technology platforms of learning. And most of them, the attitude, you may go to home and the parent can tell you that I don't want to interact with my phone is my phone, and my kids may not learn. So how can we have that attitude of parents and some teachers who are go slow to tech to have a buy in this? Because of course, and technology is moving at a very fast rate. So how can we keep pace with the technology we're using to transmit our information and learning to our learners? Then there's another thing that now goes to policy on with regards to standards and guidelines, which are requisite for content delivery. It can also give us an highlight of how safe the space which is connecting the learners and teachers to learn, how safe that place is that space, so that the issue of cyberbullying or attacks can be minimized or be done away with. So we must have a guideline on how these spaces can be safe for our learners, and that must be assured for their parents even to have a buy-in to them. Then lastly, the stakeholders, we inclusive, we should think through the inadequacies of internet connectivity in our homes, in our counties. For example, we can partner with telecoms, stakeholders like Safaricom, Airtel, Tego, or another that is doing that, so that this internet connectivity, and because most content is shared via internet, so how can these telecom stakeholders come in to assist and offer maybe data or free sites or for our learners to visit and learn through? So, and finally, just to give a conclusion, is that we should make a significant investment by infrastructure, resources, and capacity building to our teachers and parents. And now that will narrow the divide, digital divide amongst those who know and those who know. But because our data showed that only 22%, slightly more, of our parents can access and adopt remote learning. So how can we have this capacity built and strengthened for them to access this digital content to our children at home? Then as a stakeholders, we should appreciate using human-centered design, localizing learning solutions. What is happened, having success in Mozambique, for example, or Botswana or Tanzania may not act or be a solution in Kenya. So how can we localize solutions, learning solutions, by school, by community, in our country, so that we can tailor solutions of tech and learning to suit our situation locally? And lastly, to enhance foundational literacy in numeracy and literacy now and beyond, because the pandemic is here for a longer time that we expect, that we thought of, how can we integrate digital literacy and learning as a platform for learning, and it will be part of our curriculum, it's part of our review in our educational system, so that it's part of the learning that we have. Because we can never think that ICT is something different, can be taught as a subject. It's part of every subject, and we have no choice about it. We must have it in our systems. That's my thoughts on this. Thanks, Raj.
Thank you, Uchi, for that. And there's a comment from Virginia, from Zizi, which, when you're talking about how content can be taken to children, how we can bridge that accessibility gap. So what she says is that in the ZZ, they are piloting a program where the use of tablets are given in the community. Parents and champions are selected, and in consultation with local community leaders, they receive these tablets preloaded with offline content. Okay. Now then the role of these parents and the groups is to convene learning opportunities in groups, so that peer learning is also encouraged using these tablets. And this is happening across a pilot that ZZ is doing. And I think it's a very good example of how, even in non-connectivity areas, if there is a will, I mean, if Safaricom wants to give us free data, I would encourage them to please give us free data. But in case, it takes time for Safaricom to do that, we can take this offline approach, take our content, whether it's a flash drive, whether it's a tablet, whether it is, a TV put in a, public space with a flash drive. These are innovations that we can think of, I'm sure. and it's fantastic. Thanks for sharing your insights, Bose. Moving on to our next panelist, Mama Zaida, if there is a challenge clearly across the board of digital equity, let's call it that, and digital inclusion, right? So how do we actually then use technology to get to the children who we get to? Like our children are children who are vulnerable, who are, far away from the highways. How do we get to them?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much, Raj, and thank you for all who have thrown these questions to us. But I think they are very useful to share knowledge and experience and expand our understanding as well. So first of all, I would like to start with the system. I think it is important for the education system to be reoriented and accommodate technology in the curriculum, but also in the teaching process, to allow all children learn at a distance and offline. And also this will help to address the inequality issues, because if the government has not taken up the technology issue and mainstreamed it in the curriculum, it will be difficult to implement. And second one, I think the government should remove the levies and taxes on the import of digital devices to increase affordability and access. Because when the tax is high, the phone companies, for example, will also charge very high. And another recommendation is to create awareness to parents on the digital literacy by using phones, for example, and internet. Many parents, they are not even aware and capable of maneuvering in these facilities like smartphones. Some of them cannot even afford, but even for those who can afford normal phones, they have difficulties in understanding which button to press and get the content. So I think there's a need to raise that awareness, and maybe using community-based strategies where we can have some learning centers where parents can convene and someone can orient them. We have many young people in the villages, many young people in the communities who can do that. For example, in Tanzania, we have some community libraries. So parents could convene and we have some young people who can demonstrate to them how to use these facilities. But also, there's a need to orient the in-service and pre-service teachers on digital literacy, because we saw it in Tanzania during school closure. Some teachers were not able to use the digital devices to send the learning content to those children who could afford to access. And another recommendation is to revisit the education policy and procedures and guidelines to provide equal opportunity for both girls and boys to obtain digital literacy skills and access digital devices. For example, in Tanzania, students are not allowed to have phone at school. When they are caught, they can even be sent back. And another recommendation I would like to make is to ensure that the support systems are in place. Electricity infrastructure, which can allow access to internet and power supply in the remote areas. So the government, again, should look into that. And also there's a need to expand community libraries and equip them with technology facilities for parents to access and support their children with learning content, and encourage private sector like the phone companies to subsidize or reduce the operation cost of the mobile phone, for example, to make it affordable to parents. Thank you. I would like to stop there.
Thank you, Mama Zaida, and thank you very much for actually introducing the very important concept of in-service and pre-service teacher training on ICT, and delivery of education using ICT. I'm sure most of us have seen, like, if you have children who are sitting in front of the screen trying to learn, it has taken teachers a while to get used to it, right? It hasn't been easy. Like, they're there in front of a classroom, they know all the children, they know where the children sit, but here it's a different world. It's a screen. So I think that getting used to that training, I think that's a fantastic and very important point. And Moitsipe is, agreeing to you and giving a thumbs up.
Thank you.
So over to you. Like, how do you think we can push the boundaries further to support our children even more?
Absolutely. Raj, just to say and appreciate, I think the previous speakers and panelists, touched on very important points. So I have nothing, more to add. But one of the things or the elements that we should look at when you look at teaching at the right level, and the emphasis on it is to be able to tailor material according to the students' learning abilities, and then teaching based on that. So one point, as we get into technology and using either high tech or low technology, to keep in mind the content that we're delivering to young people, because there's no point in having all these nice softwares and all these nice education materials if they're not really, emphasizing on learning. So again, let us have, adaptive learning, at the back of our minds, and tailor our materials such that it can be able to be reached and be more accessible to young people, to ensure that learning happens. That said, thank you all, and it's an honor to be a part of this panel, and thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you very much for that point. And I'm super tempted to actually take that and go into a little segue. And so when Edith was presenting, she mentioned the actual use of community and technology together. And there's one very important phrase she used where she said inclusion of the internet. Now, maybe it was lost in translation, but I'm assuming that, Edith, that's what you said. Inclusive internet, right? Inclusive technology. So given that 2022 to 2032 is the decade of indigenous languages, and most of our countries are, hotbeds of indigenous languages, how do we then combine language inclusion, because children learn better in their mother tongues, in the language of the comfort, and technology to push it? How do we do that? Any thoughts on that? Hi, Edith, could you hear the question, or did I mute myself throughout the entire question? I muted myself entire question.
Solamente quería mencionar que estaba de acuerdo con lo que.
All I wanted to say was that I was in agreement with what Raj was talking about when you're talking about inclusive internet. When you mentioned about inclusive internet, all I wanted to say was that I was in agreement with you.
Okay, so inclusive internet is probably another key aspect that we might want to consider, how to get it done so that children can learn. Any other questions? Do you have, as a panelist and practitioners, as a community of practitioners, do you have questions for each other? I mean, I'm not sure if we do this, but would you like to ask questions to each other?
Not a question from me, but rather to really appreciate all the panelists for great discussion and very insightful experience sharing. And I really liked what Boaz was talking about in terms of inclusion, disability, children with disability. We've been talking about technology as if every child can see, every child can hear, every child can touch, but we have these children really who have special needs, and that is a challenge to consider in all the journey when we are talking about promoting technology. What type of technology are we promoting? And what type of groups are we focusing at? So we should not leave behind the consideration of children with special needs, children with disability, so that we challenge ourselves and trigger our thinking and mind and find out various ways of supporting those children as well. And that will also add into our advocacy to the policy actors. When they develop the policy, they should be inclusive. The curriculum, they should state how these other kids can be reached through teaching in the classroom and through learning in various scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mama Zaida. There's one question from our participants. It's a very interesting question, useful question. Julius is asking from Uganda, how do we ensure that the internet is useful while avoiding the negative content? And this is directly related to Boaz's point about cyberbullying and a safe space for children's technology use. Boaz, do you want to quickly respond to that? We're almost out of time, but I think we can still take that question.
Yeah, I reached that point because there's a concern amongst parents that when I let my child to go on to YouTube and listen to lessons, and these kids may be mischievous sometimes, they can just browse through some sites which have negative connotation or learning. But on policy, how can we ensure that any digital content or gadgets that we're using are aligned to or are programmed to not allow young learners to go into the sites which they need to visit? So we must ensure that the content that we develop as stakeholders, meet some standards so that the content is safe for everyone to read or to access, and sites that can't be not allowed to be accessed by these learners should be blocked on the gadgets they're using. And that's where, when we come to the telecom providers, they should allow to a level extent that these are gadgets used for learning only, and that can be blocked at that point. But still, because it's technology, it's moving so fast, even than us, we need to find a way to ensure that the learning space for our learners is safe.
Thank you for that, Boaz. And thank you to all our panelists. Thank you very much for your insights. Thank you very much for participating, raising questions in our minds. Thank you to all the participants for such fantastic engagement. It is awesome to see, 5 time zones on one screen. We have Mexico, we have Kenya, we have Tanzania, Botswana, India, Pakistan, all under one roof. It is fantastic to see that. And that's the spirit of PAL. And with that, over to our CEO, Armando, to close up this discussion and dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, all panelists. I would like to request all participants just to use the emotion button and show the sign of happiness in recognition to our facilitator and also our presenters today. thank you all for the good job done and for the insights you gave to us. Yeah, thank you. Just final words from this side. It was really very exciting to have this reflection, and some conclusions that I can draw from that are the following. So one, we have experienced the inequalities in access to technology during the pandemic. So some children could learn, other children were not learning. We also learned that parents were overloaded, and not only with domestic responsibilities, but also taking care of the learning of their children. That was also challenging for them, and requesting then a new role of teachers at home. And we have seen that all solutions that were put in place by different actors have included at least two options, two things: technology and the parents. So those two areas will need a further discussion and reflection from our side on how we can include them in our thoughts about learning and the teaching mechanisms in the future. And maybe we will need also to reflect on new pedagogical approaches that will use technology, and will request also a new kind of teacher training on the use of technology. So those are issues that we will need to consider in the future. Not to forget that this training for teachers maybe is also needed for parents in the use of technology to assess their, to assist their children.
Sure.
We also hear that there is a need to localize learning solutions. So not all solutions work everywhere for every child. We need to localize them according to the needs of a specific group of children. And that leads us also to have a tailored content development according to the needs of each child. And I like the way you also put together the idea of inclusive internet, inclusive technology, in terms of the access should really respond to all and to not widen the divide in the access of education. So those are my main takeaways from this very hot discussion. I will end inviting you all to pay attention to our social media, to our upcoming conference in November. We will be convening in November the 2nd to 4th in a virtual conference that will bring a lot of topics, discussions regarding education, and we are happy to know that you will be there, you will participate, and you will bring also your insights to this conference. The topic of the conference is building better, ensuring learning continuity for all children. And we mean all. We mean children with special needs. We mean children in remote areas. We mean children out of school. So we will reflect upon this topic and to see how better we can serve education in the present and in the future. Thank you all. All the best for you. And asante sana. Gracias. Kwaheri, and see
Obrigado, obrigado.
Thank you.
Gracias. Santeni sana, kwaheri.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone.